stranger in the black sedan. Won't you hop inside my car? I got pictures, got candy, I'm a lovable man, and I can take you to the nearest star. I'm your vehicle, baby. I'll take you anywhere you wanna go. I'm your vehicle, woman. By now I'm sure you know that I love you, I need you, I want you, got to have your child. Great God in heaven, you know I love you.
Arthur Rhames was not just any old musician who just came out of Flatbush. Arthur Rhames is a Flatbush legend. I have to say that in my entire life, I've never known a musician like Arthur Rhames. Arthur Rhames was just incredible. Not just a guitarist, but he played everything. Sax, flute, keyboards. Arthur Rhames was just incredible. And it was a pleasure to know Arthur. And I'm pretty sure that everyone else who knew him, they can tell you a lot of good things about Art. What you're watching is history. This is some classic footage taken of Arthur when he was alive. And this was a gig that he did with his group Eternity. They were performing on September 7th, 1978 at my father's place in New York City. I'm gonna let you watch the footage and then want to get back to talking about Arthur, one of the greatest musicians from Flatbush. Arthur Rhames, the Flatbush legend. I met Arthur back in 1973. I was introduced to him by his brothers, Clarence and William, two other great musicians. I went to school with those guys. And I went by Clarence's house one evening and heard his brother playing guitar. You know, I walked in the room and there's Arthur, just wailing and wailing. I have never seen anyone play guitar like this guy. From the first time I saw him, I was just fascinated. I mean, he played guitar so well, man, that if you watch him long enough, the guy would actually hypnotize you. So we were introduced and we became very good friends that day. Arthur was a composer. Arthur was a writer. He played so many different instruments. And I remember, you know, as he grew, he started learning more and more and more. Arthur was interested in guitar as well as learning how to play the saxophone. And we played together in a band called Life. And during that time, he was introduced to two guys, Dave Massey and Bob Ford. And during that time, these guys coached Arthur, and Arthur ended up becoming a great saxophone player. Arthur had mastered the guitar, but he accelerated on the saxophone. I mean, so quickly, very quickly. Here's Arthur playing with the Albert Daly Band. So by the end of the 70s, going into the 1980s, Arthur had established himself as a sax player. Now you got to remember, Arthur was singing in Flatbush, but Arthur was doing a lot of recordings and stuff that we didn't even know about. I uncovered alone about 30 albums that Arthur had played on. So Arthur was definitely doing recordings. He did recordings with Rashid Ali. He did recordings with Charles Tellin. So while we were all hanging around Flatbush, Arthur was definitely spending a lot of time in the studio recording. Here's a track from the dynamic duo, Rashid Ali, featuring Arthur Rhames on saxophone. As close as we were to Arthur, we had no idea, but Arthur was really in the spotlight, man. I didn't find out until the latter part of his life, because even when he was doing all this stuff, he always had time for us. I remember, man, I got a call from a friend, and he told me that, hey, man, Steve Arrington from Slave? He's got his own group now called Hall of Fame. He said, get the album, man. He said, you're going to love it. There's somebody on that album that you know. So I went and bought the album, and there's Arthur on the album with Steve Arrington. Here's Arthur's guitar solo on Nobody Can Be You But You. So toward the mid-'80s, Arthur had the Arthur Rhames Trio, and he was doing so many gigs all over the place. We had no idea that this guy was just, doing so many things. But he was making a name for himself, man. And I'm going to tell you what, he played with all the greats. I mean, they did a concert at Prospect Park. It was so many things, and Arthur was out there right amongst all the great musicians, man.
Arthur Rhames, extra, dynamic duo. Read all about it. Extra, 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 extra. Read all about it. Extra, extra.
Arthur Rhames' guitar style is what made him the Flatbush legend that he is now. But it also made him a world legend. Every time you watch Arthur, you can't help but to be spellbound. Here's Arthur in part 2 of the Eternity concert at my father's place in New York City in 1978. By the end of the 80s, Arthur Rhames had surely left his mark in Flatbush. I mean, everybody knew who he was. Everybody knew what he did. Arthur Rhames is a legend. You know, I tell you, I had just finished playing with a group called Inner Strength. And I left New York City toward the end of the 90s, but just before I left, I remember getting a call from Paul Earl Yo-Yo. And he says, hey man, have you seen Arthur lately? I said, no. He says, I want you to come and go with me tonight. So we went to a place called Small's Paradise. And Arthur Rhames was playing sax that night. And Arthur was in rare form. The place was dark and it was packed. Everyone sat around tables with candles on them, sitting in anticipation to hear Arthur Rhames come out and perform. Arthur came out, and when Arthur came out, the lights were on him, and I have never seen anyone in my life play the sax like Arthur did that night. It was like Arthur was in a trance that night. He was doing things with the sax that I've never seen anybody do. He was lifting up his leg and putting the bell of the sax on his leg to mute the sound. He was doing all kinds of things. It was like he was in a trance, man. And when it was over, man, he played one big loud sound and just ran off stage. That was the last time that I ever saw Arthur Rhames. I had left New York and I found out for some friends that Arthur Rhames had passed away. Did not know how he died, did not know what went on, but all I knew was that a Flatbush legend had passed away. But I want to say that I was so glad to know Arthur. I remember Arthur spent a lot of time in my home. Arthur spent a lot of time with our family. Everyone from Flatbush, all the musicians knew Arthur. And he was a leader, okay, and everyone loved him. And he was serious about music, and if you were around Arthur, you had to be serious. Flatbush, we definitely lost a good one. And I just want to say that I love Arthur Rhames for who he was and what he did. And I'm hoping that I can hook up with his brother Clarence, who lives in Richmond here, and see if I can get with him and do some things, because Clarence, his brother, is a great musician as well, who plays sax and drums and all. But there will never, ever be another legend like Arthur Rhames. This is Doc Timberlake for Flatbush Legends, speaking to you about the great guitarist, the great pianist, the great saxophone player, Arthur Rhames. Good night, and see you next time.